Well, today I've got to repair this Metalsub KL1242. So it's a 12 volt light, Metalsub light. The fault has come in with suspected cable and switch. This is a fairly simple fix, so we'll just have a quick go and see how this works. So I'll just do a test first, just to see what happens. The switch is not working very well, and obviously the light hasn't come on. And if I jiggle the cable on this gland here, you can see the light does come on and then come off. So after a period of time, if this is left swinging when you're diving or whatever, you're packing it in the bag and you're forcing this, after a period of time one of the two power cables will break, and that will stop the power going to the light. The switch itself I'll show you in a moment, but this rotating bezel has a magnet in the bezel which turns the light on and off, and if that is not washed out properly, that magnet can begin to corrode and it starts to expand, and then it becomes slightly more stiff to change. So whilst it's in for having this done, I'm going to change this one as well because it is quite stiff, but it may just be something inside it, but we'll have a look in a moment. So if you're going to attempt this yourself, it's reasonably straightforward. You will need a soldering iron, so you need to unsolder the two wires and put the two wires back on. Leave this end alone for the time being. Don't start this end, because if you move this cable and the gland, there is a chance that you could damage the solder pads where the cable is attached to the circuit board. That will be more obvious once we open this up. So to do this, we can unscrew the LED module. This hasn't been open for a while, so it's quite stiff. This will just unscrew, and this is the LED module. Now this particular light comes in a number of different combinations or power settings. So this one, as I can see, the writing is a 3500 lumen. So the heads aren't interchangeable. So if you've got a 2400 lumen or 6300 lumen, you can't swap the heads around, and obviously you can't swap the circuit boards around. But the principle of changing the cable, etc., is fairly similar. So I will get a, sorry, start that again, 2.5mm hex, put that into there, the two bolts inside, just turn those, make sure you can see what I'm doing. So we've got two hex bolts inside the head. I could just rotate round and we can undo those. Let's pop those off and this one off, and we can now pull the body open, he says. Get those two out. So that body just slides, you can see the key marks there. It will just slide over the board like that, over the light, and it seals on this O-ring at the bottom. So we can just slide that off. Once we've taken that off, keep these all in view. We can now see the two cables. So we've got a brown cable which is the positive lead, and we got a blue cable which is a negative lead. And obviously we got on this particular board, but not always, there's a plus and there's a minus to indicate. This would probably indicate that this cable has been changed in the past, because it's got a plus and a minus on there, which isn't standard on all lights when they come for brand new. So whilst it's got it open, I'm just going to get rid of all this excess grease which is on the O-rings. Give that a bit of a clean up. So this is the part where I was saying, if you undo this gland here and you start rotating the cable, this can spin and maybe pull those off. So the best option is just to take the body apart first and just unsolder the positive wire and the negative wire, and that will just prevent any future damage. And these you can just undo. It's a 19mm spanner. I can now undo the gland. This gland is going to get replaced with the cable assembly. Everything's going to get replaced in one go, and I can these. Now the other thing is, I think this has been replaced and he's over tightened this. This is way too tight, and that won't help the cable assembly. And so I'm going to have to put this into a vise and open this up. Just going to pause the video a moment, just so I can remove that. Right, so we're just unpausing now. It was only paused for a few seconds, but it's just to undo that. I had to put that in a vise because it's just going to slip on the spanner. It doesn't really need to be that tight. I think people tend to see it and tighten it up, but it's not necessary to be quite as tight as that. Anyway, once that comes apart, you can remove the whole cable assembly. That's going to go back to the user. Don't particularly want it, and I'm going to pop the gland out, the seal at that end. Just pop that back on the cable, and I tend to return that to the user, and they can chuck it away or do whatever they want with it. But it will be one of the two wires in here. It's just where that's just been bending continuously. This one of these will eventually break, and as you can see from the end of here, this is started to corrode anyway, so obviously that's going to wear, so it's worthwhile changing. So we're changing the whole assembly basically. Now the actual switch is a little bit iffy on this one, so we can undo that with the same hex bolt, and this just undoes. It's fairly simple. Again, you can tighten this up or loosen this off depending on how stiff the switch is. And I'm just going to undo that, and then that should just slide off. Just give this a bit of a wipe down. Doesn't seem to be anything wrong inside there. Take the that's just a latch. But if I clean this up, the magnet is this piece here. It's sealed inside there, and that is, as that rotates around here, that will go past, well, you can't quite see them in there, but there's two sensors in there that will go past the sensor and then switch the light on or off. So I'm just gonna, so if that's, could have mud in it, or the magnet could just have expanded enough to make it stiff. Just going to try that again and see if it's any smoother. It's not drastically bad, but I think for the fact that I've got it here now, I might as well change both parts at the same time and it's all done. But actually that's not turning drastically badly. So I'm just going to try a new one. This is a brand new one and it rotates much smoother. So it's one of those where you could use this one still. This one is working, it's perfectly okay, but it's slightly misformed. Could be that it's been dropped or something like that, but I'm guessing the magnet's starting to swell and then forcing that plastic to change its shape. So on this occasion I'm going to swap the switch over. They're fairly inexpensive. You will need to remove the cable to change this switch bezel, so I think it's probably going to be a better option to change it at this particular time. I think they're about £15 to replace, so I think for that price it's worthwhile changing. So I'm just going to pop the hex screw back into the new one. There's the old one, so we'll keep it all in vision. And this one you can tighten the screw up and it will make it slightly stiffer or looser depending on which way whether you tighten it or loosen it. So just gonna insert the screw. Spring looks okay. Put the latch back in, so that just inserts into there. Let's see if I get a bit more light on the subject. And into there. Push that back on and it will lock back into place. So it's locked, and then we can tighten that back up. Just going to test it, see how stiff it is now. That's a reasonable, maybe just a turn more. And that's working absolutely perfectly, so I'm happy with that change. Now we get the cable replacement. So this is the complete cable, so we replace the whole end from there up to there. I'm going to take this gland off I'm going to insert that into there just to make sure it goes home all the way, and then I can insert the cable into position and just get it into the right position. I'm going to rotate the cable round so that I've got the positive wire on the correct side and the negative wire on the correct side. How far you push it into the body is not so important on this one, but there's no point wasting cable, so we'll just put it onto there like that. Now again, because I don't want to solder these on and then tighten up the gland, because there's a chance of twisting the cable as I do it. So I'm going to tighten this gland up reasonably tightly. It goes in nicely. Just have a look. That's not going in nicely. And just trying to do this under the camera as well. It's going to be easier just to do this. And as you can see, the cable is twisting as we go. And it's unnecessary to really tighten this up past what it needs to be. Just going to check the cables in the right place, and it will just settle where it is and it will clamp onto the cable. So that's very tight, that's tight enough. Where after I've tested the light and left it in a bucket of water for 24 hours, I will just knit that back up again just so that there's no movement on the cable, and then retest the light. I can now do this bottom gland up, and this can just be tightened up. Again, I'll knit that up with a thing later on. So now that's my cable assembly back on. I can just resolder the two wires. So it doesn't make any difference which order you do them in. But they must be on the correct position. So brown is going to my positive one. It's got a positive on there. If you open up your light, it hasn't got a positive and negative on there, it's probably worth them putting it on with a marker pen before you start, just so you know which way round you want them. And then I'm going to do the blue wire or the negative wire. It's not a tricky job, just a little bit fiddly. So I've got a blue wire and I've got a brown wire. They're in the correct positions. Quite happy with that, that's good. Just check it, make sure there's no solder splashed anywhere once you've been doing your soldering, which can often happen. I'm going to give the O-ring another quick clean on here, and I'm going to just clean the inside of this. This silver thing here does actually come out quite easily, so you can either remove it or not, as the case may be, but I tend to leave it in the same position, but on this occasion I have taken it out, as you can see. So that's all clean. Just going to pop some replacement grease onto the O-ring. Don't put too much on. It's just enough to be shiny all the way around. So it wants an even level really all the way around, which is quite nice. And this has got two marks on here, so the circuit board will slide in over to there, and then it will seal against the O-ring, and you can just simply push that onto the O-ring and into place. Once you've got it into place, I can pop the thing back on and insert one of the hex bolts, and they will go into the right position hopefully. And obviously this has been all done with the light disconnected, so if anything touches anything incorrectly, it's not going to do any damage. So I'm going to make sure that I've got both of them in position first, because all this has to line up nicely, and I tend to tighten up one at a time, just a little bit of it at a time, so it pulls it evenly down onto the O-ring. Tend not to just tighten up one side and then just concentrate on one side. And they don't really need to be over tight, but just nip them up. And then I can just get rid of any excess grease. Just come round to there. Check the switch is rotating very smoothly. This is much smoother than it was before, so definitely worth changing on this occasion. Clean up the inside part. And I'm just going to clean up the O-rings on the LED module. Check those through. Give that a bit of a wipe as well. Now here I will put some grease back onto the O-rings. Again, try and keep it even all the way round. Put that back to go on there. And that can be reinserted back onto the light module. So this part can only go on one way round, so it's all fairly straightforward, all reasonably tight. I can gently nip that one back up now. Now, as the first one is clamped, there's very little chance now of twisting the cable as we go. Just check them there. Don't really wrench them up with anything else. They don't need to be. And now we can test the light. Connect the light back up, switch the light on. Obviously we've got a power light on here which will indicate that there's power going to the light, and there's a big indicator on here that there's light coming out of it. So we can turn it into a lower mode, higher mode, and that's all working, and then into SOS mode, and that's all working fine. Take it to there, into the lock position, doesn't come on by accident, everything's working fine. So all I will do now is I will put that light in a bucket of water for 24 hours just to see if there's anything upsetting it, and just leave the light on a burn test. So as long as it lasts for over an hour with this particular battery size, then I'm happy. Thanks very much.